working, I'm not hurting. Baby girl over here straight twerking. No smoking, no drinking. Gonna complicate things with my thinking. She gave me both, I hit it from the back. The only thing she good for, so I sent her back. No, I don't want it, you can have it, girl. Cause you ain't nothing but up in this world. Yup, yup.
Boy, you a fool. Y'all give it up for my man, Straight Dub. I'm gonna leave his link in the description box. Man, when I tell y'all, man, go check him out, bro. The man is cool and hilarious as hell. Y'all shout out Straight Dub. And don't forget to send y'all clips in, you know. Shouting out True, let them know you're rocking with the True family. Speak on what you want to speak on, and if I think it's weird, then I'm just going to put it in the beginning of the video. Shout out to Myra P and my other folks for sending in their clips. And we're going to do this every time. So, you know what I'm saying? So once again, shout out Straight Up. That boy fool. True. And salute to all y'all. Now let's get into this content. Today's content. Cornelius Smith. And how he not no stranger to being involved in no murder. And matter of fact, he will tell some shit. Let's go back to the days when he was a witness in this murder and told everything that he know. True paperwork time. Read this the whole damn transcript because it's going to take a long time. So I'm going to leave this link in the description box as well so that you can go read all the in-between things. So I'm just going to go with the trial state's proof. On Cornelius back in 2008. Follow along. Cornelius Smith. Letitia Hawkins, the victim's sister, identified photographs of the victim and said that the last time she saw him alive was on January 27, 2008. Cornelius Smith testified that the night of January 27, 2008, Cornelius Smith testified that the night of January 27, 2008, he was working at the Fire Ice nightclub in the Winchester Road and Kirby Parkway area of Memphis, taking up money in the parking lot. Now, Winchester and Kirby Parkway, y'all remember the stolen Mercedes? Well, that's right down the street. The carjacked Mercedes, yeah, at the Kroger gas station. Yeah, Cornelius Smith fingerprints on it. Well, this is the same Kirby Parkway right down the street from here. So we know Cornelius definitely was in the area, taking up money in the parking lot. The victim was a good friend of his and also worked as a security guard inside the club. Smith recalled that on Friday, January 25th, the victim and Cortez Johnson, don't worry about that Johnson, gonna see a lot of them, CeeLo, were involved in an altercation that ended with the victim putting Johnson in a sleeper hold, rendering him unconscious. After Johnson was revived a few seconds later, he got on the telephone and started making some phone calls. Johnson then went outside and got into a car that had just pulled up, and he was not allowed back in the club that night. Smith testified that Johnson returned to the club on Sunday night, January 27th, along with the defendant, who was driving a dark-colored four-door car, possibly a Nissan Maxima with tinted windows. Later, between 3 and 4 a.m., the victim agreed to give Smith and another man, Matt Gunn, a ride home from the club. After taking Gunn to his house, the victim and Smith were waiting at a traffic light to get on 385 Expressway, right by the Kroger, where the car got carjacked. While the victim was talking on his cell phone, Smith noticed the car he had seen the defendant driving earlier approached the victim's car on the driver's side. Smith could not see the defendant in the car, but he saw Johnson on the passenger side hanging out the window with a gun hanging out pointing towards the car. Smith tried to grab the victim, but it was too late. They was already firing shots. Smith ducked and prayed that he would not die. He heard 15 to 20 gunshots, glass breaking, and bullets hitting the car. Smith testified that when the shooting stopped and the car pulled away, he shook the victim and, realizing he was dead, put the car in park and called the police. Smith gave the police a description of the shooter's car and told them that Johnson was the shooter. Later that morning, Smith provided a statement to the officers at the police station. Sometime later, officers showed Smith a series of photographs of vehicles from which he identified one that looked similar to the car the shooter had been in. Smith said that there were street lights at the intersection where the shooting took place and that he was able to clearly see the car the shooter was in. Lieutenant Donald Crowe with the Memphis Police Department testified that he responded to the scene of the shooting. Lieutenant Crowe stated that Cornelius Smith provided him with the shooter's nickname, and he took Smith to the police station where Smith gave a formal statement. Lieutenant Crowe identified several photographs of the crime scene. Officer Alpha Hines, a crime scene investigator with the Memphis Police Department, testified that she collected evidence at the scene as well as prepared a sketch and documented measurements. Matt Gunn testified that he was working security at the Fire Ice nightclub the night of January 27 and early morning of January 28, 2008. Gunn was aware that the victim and Cortez Johnson had gotten into an argument 2 nights earlier that ended in the victim putting Johnson in a chokehold until he fell asleep. Gunn recalled that Johnson was furious with the victim and kept on saying he was going to get his ass. Johnson also said that he had some heaters for that nigga's ass, which referred to guns. The morning of January 28th, they closed the club a little after 4 a.m., and the victim agreed to take Gunn and Cornelius Smith home. The victim dropped Gunn off at his home, and that was the last time Gunn saw the victim alive. Ashley Butler, Cortez Johnson's girlfriend at the time of the incident, testified that she dropped Johnson off at the Fire Ice nightclub on Friday, January 25th, 2008, around 8 or 9 p.m. He called her to pick him up from the club sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. the morning of January 26th. When she arrived at the club was closed, and Johnson was not there. She went to a gas station, then returned to the club and continued to wait for Johnson. She saw the defendant's car outside the club, and eventually Johnson exited and indicated for her to wait while he walked to the defendant's car. Johnson got into the defendant's car, then returned to the front of the club where he was angrily talking to some people. She noted that Johnson had his hands in his pockets, and she could see the end of a gun. Johnson then briefly returned to the defendant's car before he got into her car. Johnson no longer had the gun when he got into her car. Butler was aware that Johnson went to the club again 2 nights later. However, it was the defendant who took him that night, which was unusual because she normally drove him. Sergeant Murray testified that she first came in contact with the defendant on January 29, 2008, when she walked into the interview room and he was in, and he recognized her as being the mother of one of his former classmates. The defendant specifically requested to talk to Sergeant Murray, so she explained to him his constitutional rights and took a formal statement from him. In that statement, the defendant denied being responsible for the victim's death or knowing who was responsible. However, he acknowledged that Cortez Johnson may have wanted to harm the victim because of a dispute the two had earlier the week of the shooting. The defendant recalled that after Johnson's dispute with the victim, Johnson asked the defendant for a gun, but the defendant did not provide him one. Later that day, Johnson continued to ask the defendant about a gun, but the defendant told Johnson that he could not get one. The defendant said that the night of the shooting, he went with Johnson to the club where they stayed until 2:30 a.m. and then went to Mickey D's near Johnson's grandmother's house. After staying at McDonald's for 20 to 30 minutes, the defendant dropped Johnson off at his grandmother's and went home. The defendant claimed to be unaware of Johnson's whereabouts around 4:30 a.m. and did not see or hear anything from him until around noon when he got a text message from Johnson saying, "I got a fucked up situation, call me ASAP." Around 6:30 that evening, Johnson asked the defendant to provide an alibi for him. Officers Roger Wheeler and Ricky Davidson, crime scene investigators with the MPD, processed and collected evidence from the victim's vehicle. 15 bullet fragments were recovered from the car, and 3 of its 4 windows were shot out. Sergeant Mullins testified that he first came in contact with the defendant after he interviewed Cortez Johnson, and Johnson gave the defendant's name as one who could provide an alibi. During the course of being questioned as a witness, the defendant gave Sergeant Mullins a description of his car, which was close enough to the description given by the surviving victim, Cornelius Smith. Sergeant Mullins inquired where the defendant's car was parked and took photographs of it. He assisted in creating a photographic array of similar cars, which was then shown to Cornelius Smith, who identified the defendant's car. Sergeant Mullins testified that after the defendant's car was selected by Cornelius Smith, the surviving victim, the defendant was advised of his rights and was questioned as a suspect by him and Sergeant Mason. There she go, Caroline Mason. When the officers started asking the defendant questions regarding the shooting, he said that he did not want to talk anymore, so the officers left the room to discuss how to proceed. Meanwhile, Sergeant Murray appeared, stating that the defendant wanted to speak with her. So Sergeants Murray and Caroline Mason conducted an interview of the defendant. So Caroline Mason then ran into Cornelius. Okay then. All right, Sergeant Mullins testified that the defendant was ultimately placed on a 48-hour hold in jail. However, the next day, January 30th, he was brought up for more questioning. Sergeant Mullins was aware that the defendant had been Mirandized prior to speaking to him. In their conversation, the defendant admitted to Sergeant Mullins that he supplied an inoperable gun, meaning a gun that don't work, to Johnson the Friday night of the altercation between Johnson and the victim, and then told him what happened on the night of the shooting. Sergeant Mullins then Mirandized the defendant again and took a formal statement from him. In his statement, the defendant admitted that the statement he had given the previous day was not entirely truthful. No shit. He stated that Johnson was responsible for the victim's death. He admitted that he provided Johnson with a gun after Johnson's altercation with the victim at the club the Friday night before the shooting, but he explained that the gun was not going to work and he got it back from Johnson that night. The defendant stated he talked to Johnson on Saturday, the day after the altercation, and Johnson again asked him for a gun, but the defendant did not provide one. The defendant stated that the following night, Sunday, he took Johnson to the club where they stayed until 2:45 a.m. when Johnson said he was ready to leave. The defendant continued. So we left the club and went to McDonald's in South Memphis. Left the McDonald's about 3:30 and then arrived at his grandma's house. I didn't see him go in, but he went on the side of the house and was like, hold up. I left something at the Fire and Ice and then gave me a 20. 20 what? 20 rock? $20? What? So on our way back to Fire and Ice, he was saying, I better not see this nigga. And I was like, who? But he mentioned no name. So as we arrived at Fire and Ice, Johnson was like, that nigga go right there. And I was like, who? And he said, that nigga I got into it with Friday night. He said, follow him. And I was like, for what? And he was like, just follow him, bro. So we followed him for a short period of time. Then all of a sudden at the red light, Johnson said, stop, slow down right here. And I was like, for what? Then all of a sudden I heard several gunshots and sat there for a minute because I was in a shock to what was going on and drove off. Took Johnson to his grandma's house, and on the way to his grandma's house, he was like, I told that nigga I was going to get at him. Then I dropped him off and went to the house. I'm going to let y'all read the rest of this. That's enough for me. Let's go back over so y'all can see who case this is. This is the defendant. That's who they talking about. Kelly Walker was convicted by a Shelby County Criminal Court jury of facilitation of first degree premeditated murder. Class A felony, aggravated assault. Class C felony. He was sentenced as a range one offender to 25 years and 6 years, respectively, to be served consecutively. So that's 31 years. And yeah, y'all can go read all the in between because there's some more juicy shit down there. Let me see if I can get to it right quick. And that just shows y'all that Cornelius might look like he's square and all that. But this nigga been into some shit, and this ain't his first time telling some shit. So I'm gonna leave this link in the description box, and when y'all read it, cause there's some juicy shit down there, and I don't want to make this video too long, cause I got some more shit to get on. So look, defendant's proof. Y'all want to go read that? Time about his mother testified she woke up around 4 a.m. on January 28th because she had to take one of her sons to the airport. When she walked downstairs, she noticed that the defendant was asleep on the couch. However, she did not know what time the defendant had gotten home. Look, the defendant testified he met Cortez Johnson a few months prior to the shooting, and they became friends. Johnson was an event promoter for Fire Ice nightclub. The defendant recalled that Johnson called him around 3 a.m. in the morning of January 26th because he had gotten into an argument with the victim, a security guard at the club, and wanted a gun. The defendant assumed that Johnson only wanted to scare someone, so he took his gun, which he kept under his car seat for protection, and met Johnson at the club. When the defendant arrived, Johnson got into the defendant's car and really didn't say nothing. He just said, "Give me the strap." The defendant knew that his gun did not work, so he riding around with a gun that don't work. So he just gave it to him. Yeah, right. Johnson got out of the car and walked around like he was waiting on someone to come out of the club, but then got back into the defendant's car and returned the gun. Johnson then got into a car with his girlfriend. Y'all can read all of that. All right, so that's it. We're going to cut this out right here due to this a long-ass shit, but trust me. Go in there and read this whole thing into the end, and then y'all going to see some amazing shit about Cornelius Smith, and then we're going to talk about something else later on tonight. But I just want to bring y'all this exclusive information just to shed light on your boy Cornelius so that you may look at him in a totally different way and then tell me what you see. He not that motherfucker innocent, and he ain't scared to tell a goddamn thing. Yeah, long live Flipper, man. And salute to each and every one of y'all. Y'all keep sending them clips in, and we're going to keep on letting the people speak in this way. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Myra P. and the rest of everybody else, all my kings and queens. Cash App $, True Results #2. All donations are appreciated as usual. And once again, thank y'all for holding me down and being inspirational so that I may stay fueled up. Until next time, stay true, stay blessed. True.